Good morning. Welcome to the North Richland Hills City Council Goals and Planning Work Session. Excuse me. It is 8:30, and I'll call the Thursday, July 11th, 2024 City Council Goals and Planning Work Session to order. A quorum of the City Council is present, and the meeting has been duly posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act of the Texas Government Code. If you'll notice, the public comments are at the very end, so you get a chance to hear the discussion before you want to make comments. I think it'll be helpful. And then also, if y'all remember before you speak, please turn on the mic and speak to it, because we are filming it for posting later. But I'm going to roll out and make a few comments before we get started. First, I want to say thanks for everybody who's coming today. Actually, we're a bigger crowd than I anticipated, which is great. And thanks for everybody that filled out the survey. Always very helpful to get the comments first. You know, I think about this before we started, and we go into this. The one thing that I think I heard a lot of is people are hurting from taxes. Appraisal increases, the inflation isn't helping, and I think we need to focus on a goal that, excuse me, that we're going to look at a no new revenue tax rate again. I think we have challenges there. I know that we had the TAD board positions that were elected this last time, and their goal was really to listen to the taxpayers and people and the homeowners a little more than what the old methodology was doing. You know, I think our challenge here is that I think our preliminary is that our appraisals are going to be for the area either level or maybe even a little down, which will make the taxing a little more difficult to get to where we want to be. But I will say this, that's what we elected the new board members on TAD, was to get a handle on the appraisals, because if you have yours, there's a third of the county that actually are going for protest. And right now, because of the atmosphere of everything, they're just agreeing to the protest at where they are, or some settlement to lower them. And it is making things where people can't afford to be in their homes, and I think that's one thing that everybody needs to be concerned with. You know, I am today, which is great. I love a strategic planning process. Matter of fact, it's probably one of my favorite things I even did at work, was doing this for our company once a year. I will say this, you can easily have conversations that go off into the Netherlands, and so we need to make sure we're relatively strict about a parking lot, which is an issue that we need to cover later versus an axe we need to grind today. I will say this, going with this, there's no need to get your feelings hurt. We need to be cognizant of everybody's feelings, including the staff here. You know, I guess I'll say it's sad to say that I know that there's people that are still sharing the ridiculous narratives of some of the things that were said, including my favorite, which was getting rid of Paulette and making it a mayor-run city. I wouldn't have quit working if I was going to do that. There's going to be huge budget cuts and layoffs. I don't think anybody has a plan for any of that. None of us are looking at doing anything rash. And I think that's still being talked about a lot. And I think people, some even in here, are receptive to that conversation. And I think that you should take the time to squell whisper campaigns that are inappropriate. You know, set people straight. You know, we're here because people wanted change, and that's how they voted. And it was relatively clear in any conversation that we had that anyone would listen, actually. That everybody was just really looking for some positive change and not change for the sake of change. And I think what we need to do is we need to build everyone's confidence, both in the city and out, and people working in the city, that we're here to really focus on optimizing spending and services, and something that supports that. Save where we can. That needs to be our goal, and that should be our goal all the time. My division I ran, we were always we had the lowest cost per member service with the highest customer service scores, and being number one meant I need to work harder to be number one again the very next year. It doesn't mean, it doesn't say, oh, we're awesome. It's, no, we got to keep working hard because everybody wants to come after us. You know, I love a book, Paulette knows, I talked about it, It's Good to Great. And Jim Collins also has one, Built to Last, and he has a third book that was his last book. And he has a phrase in there, facing the brutal facts. Some people look at that as getting insulted by something that you're saying, but the reality is facing the brutal facts is important. You know, and let me start with one brutal fact that I've learned, and I'm not surprised with since being here. Everybody I worked with staff so far has been helpful, responsive, and patient. Especially, I use the word patient, just especially with me because I've asked 1,000 questions, because I like to make decisions from details up, not from the top down, so I understand what's happening. Jim Collins also said in his book, we need to figure out what we need to stop doing. You know, and remember that good is the enemy of great. We can say we're really good, and you'll hear me use the term a lot, good, because I don't think you can achieve great. I think that's always a goal into the distance, because we can always be better. I'll say this, knocking on a lot of doors through the city, I learned a few things. And I put some of those comments in what I did for the survey as well. And I know occasionally I used, and a couple other people used, NRH leadership. That was really meaning the mayor and the council. That really wasn't meaning the people at the city, just so you know. But what I learned in culture is there is a significant number of people that have been disenfranchised in the city. And I like the comment that we need to service everyone, because I know how that feels, because I think the last 8 to 10 years, I think there's a huge number of people that have been completely disenfranchised and feeling that they've been listened to at all in the city. The outsider versus insider mentality was very strong, and people felt like they were pushed away. I know, and I took the approach when we were, and I'll just tell you how it manifests itself in one way, was how I looked at it for appointing people to councils and boards. I think one of the things that turns lots of people off is when a council member or multiple council members takes one person and puts them on 2 and 3 and 4 boards, and then tell other people, we don't have any room for you. That was a very common comment. So I wasn't going down the path of appointing people that were on one board to other boards as well, because more people wanted to be included. I think that's I think appointing people to multiple boards just takes people and again, continues to disenfranchise, but isn't an inclusive idea to bring people in. And I believe that perpetuated something of a culture in the city that we didn't want to, that was not an intent to perpetuate, but the separation and not extending it to more people out there, to more constituencies, to more groups of people that they can influence and say, hey, these things are going on in the city. I think it seemed to get more and more active, and people felt very entitled. And I said, don't we want to be part of, and the people I spoke with that I wasn't reappointing, and I said, don't we want to be part of, you're already a member of one committee, don't you want other people to feel like they can be a part of the city too? And they were very open to the idea in the conversation, at least to me. I don't know if they did afterwards. But I think it's a feeling that we really need to have that reaches out to more people versus a culture that just excludes people and limits the access. Our customers don't feel like, our residents don't feel like customers when doing business with the city. I think we need to fix that. And I know a lot of it is in permitting, where some of that occurred. Property rights as well, with regard to the conversation around the chickens, making it permanent versus temporary. I think that kept the culture issue alive again. Optimizing things, are we looking at ways, permitting things to be easier or even less reasons for permitting? Do we have permitting? Why are we trying to do some of that? Let me give you one example. That I think we need to really explore to say it needs to move on. Watauga and Richland Hills are the only two other cities in northeast Tarrant County that require single-family resident rental inspections. Now, a lot of these people that are in some of these homes that are especially in the south side of North Richland Hills, they don't have the money for 2 deposits. So they're a hot move-in, right? They're trying to get people to move in there, and we're waiting on an inspector to come and tell what capitalism takes care of. Scope creep creates government overreach, not intentionally, because you can talk to a lot of the people and they think and feel like, well, we're conservative about all this stuff. Well, yeah, but you're holding a landlord's property hostage because you can't turn on the water until you have this inspection done, and you're having to wait on that while somebody else is trying to get out of an apartment and move and bring over the same day, and you're on hold. I don't know that it actually does much good. That capitalism itself or free enterprise itself doesn't already take care of, to say a soffit needs to be painted or replaced, or a bush needs to be cut back off of something, and those little tidbits are out there on this inspection. And when you can list the ones, Grapevine, Colleyville, Southlake, Keller, Hearst, Euless, Bedford, none of them do it, right? Just Watauga and Richland Hills, each taking on a little bit different form as far as the research that I've looked at. I'd really like to consider getting rid, or things that we would stop doing to be good to great, like that. I think we need measurements for success that I certainly had a hard time coming across in getting to what I wanted, which was like a debt to equity ratio, or a debt to income ratio, if you will, staff to resident ratios, comparable city to city ratios. It's very hard without standardized look at financials to get a comparison to one city to the next, because line items of expenses get put into different buckets and there's no comparability, at least that I could figure out. And believe me, I spent tens of hours of time trying to consolidate and rework them. Department alignment expenses. Our favorite in the schools was always teacher to administration ratios, that everyone wanted to kind of look at as a standard and say you're spending too much on administration when you look at that. And I guess one of the things that I don't see, and maybe I just need to spend time learning it a little better, is an IT, what I would call an IT roadmap. I always looked at the IT roadmap. It's one of the bases for understanding from an infrastructure perspective where I could streamline and save money, and I could get a lot of things done with that. Now, when I'm talking about that, I'm not really talking about a project roadmap, which I think stays internal to IT. I'm talking a lot more with when you're talking about a platform, how you're integrating ideas. This kind of came to me when we were doing the municipal court tour, and talking about how COVID forced the hand, for people coming in all the time, and then there are no lines anymore inside because everybody was taking their tickets, or they're doing their court summons or whatever, and they're doing it all online and not having to come in anymore. And those are the kinds of things or breakthroughs that using IT as a tool for efficiency, not just one that kind of keeps you up to date. I was very much a strong believer in that when I was running operations for our division at United Healthcare. A new revenue source. And I know going around, I'll tell you, talking to people, I don't know anyone that really cares for the idea of short-term rentals in their neighborhood. One is they're not even in our cities, and I think one of the missed opportunity from a money perspective is, should we be taxing them like hotels? I don't see a reason why not. I don't see a reason why we shouldn't explore something like that. That's a source of revenue that I believe that could help us out. Street safety. Now, I'll say this: we can't look at 1,600 stop signs and make sure that they're all being policed. And I take that back. I guess we could, but the taxes we would have to charge would end up being a tax revolt from the citizens. Metrics of where the traffic deaths, traffic accidents, and speeding are, and focus on those things. I will say this: I love that we have some more people out there, and I forgot the name that you called it the other day, Paula, which was the, positive policing or something, but. Okay, thank you.
The power shift. So we did that back in March and April, and then the chief reinstituted that this month. So that's why you're seeing more officers on the streets.
Yeah, and so people, and we flip to, oh my gosh, there's too many people speeding around, doing anything to now, I can't believe they're writing me tickets, which, is your expectation. There's always a balance. And honestly, I like the, they're writing me tickets because they've returned to the apartments where I always coming down Davis Boulevard, and now I'm very cognizant of the speed that I'm going, more than I was. The other clear signals that we got, and I say we, I think those of us that won the last election because we were listening and kind of in some ways, not always, we're a little more like-minded. No more apartments. People don't want more apartments. They at least want to slow them dramatically, but there's also the overcrowding issue that everybody keeps looking at and saying, we're struggling, and I think there was some comments on the surveys is that, now that we have more population, we have more crime, and with the overcrowding, you have more crime, and the closer people get together, there's more crime. That's just the way it works. I think the idea of focusing on North Richland Hills itself, I was reading a lot of the websites of other cities last night and this morning, and like the Hearst, as the Hearst Way. Now, it used to be always Hearst First when it was Souder back in those days. Now it's the Hearst Way, and we talk about, instead of North Richland Hills, we do talk about North Richland Hills, but then we talk more of the region. I think a lot of people feel like that's a distraction from a lot of things that need to happen in our city. Efficiency audit, not everywhere, but at least some areas, so that we're comfortable and confident that we're spending the money like we should. And I think a goal for today, really, certainly, I think getting out there where we are all kind of on the same page, and I think there'll be some, tough discussions. It's not like we're going to tire irons out after each other, but I think everybody needs to understand that you just have a different view in certain areas. But I think going forward, we need to be able to convince everyone, including ourselves, that we're properly spending every dollar. Not saying we're not, but I want a really good argument to say why I am. And I want to be able to defend that. In saying that, again, we do have public comments at the end of the day today, and always interested in those. But what I'd like now is, before we roll it over to kind of Randy, I'd like Paulette to give a few inspiring words for all of us how we're going to move forward. So
well, that's a lot of pressure to say that they would be inspiring. So I'll say one thing is I also love strategic planning sessions. I'm really a planner at heart. I've facilitated a few strategic planning sessions myself. So, and the reason I'm really looking forward to this discussion, and especially after seeing your survey results, is now that the election is over, I'm looking forward to getting a unified direction from the council as a body, because that helps me do my job well, and it helps the staff do their job well. So I'm looking forward to today as y'all kind of focus on the big picture of what are the things that you all want us to focus on in the coming year, but also in the coming next couple of years from a policy perspective, so that we can begin to look at how would we go about working those things into the work plan and presenting those things to you all. I know that everyone's ready to dive into the budget and tax rate discussion. I know that, and I would just say that this is the first step in the process. So what I mean by that is this allows you all to tell us what you want us to focus on from a big picture, and really without focusing on the money piece of it yet. What we need to hear from you is some things we've already heard from you all, and that is what you hear from people. But today is about giving us a unified direction where you want us to focus those things. So under the council manager form, that's kind of how it works. The council tells us what they want us to do, and the city manager brings back a plan to you all of how we intend to do that. And so that is what will happen as we get into the budget discussions and our first budget work session on August 2nd. Well, we're going to have a preliminary work session on July 22nd. Really on that, we're going to focus on just the budget from a big picture, the various funds, where the money comes from, where it goes, so that we're all kind of going into the August 2nd meeting with the same understanding of the budget as a whole. But so this is that first step. Again, so I'm looking forward to understanding those areas where the council wants us to focus, and then we'll take a look at how we can put that into the budget considering our resources and our resource constraints. And our resources here at the city and anywhere really are people, time, and money. So we're very people-centric. It takes people to deliver the services, but those are the resources we'll be looking at as we prepare our proposed budget. But I will say, we do listen. I've met with each of you one-on-one over the last couple of months. I hear you. We also listen to our citizens, and what I've heard so far, and what we're already working into the proposed budget, is a plan for efficiency studies or process improvement studies, a plan for more transparency and public engagement. We have worked into the budget calendar what we're calling a budget roadshow. So after we present the proposed budget to you all on August 2nd, we will take the budget out on the road in various locations in the community. You all are invited to also attend those, and the purpose is to have some graphics and information available about what's in the proposed budget. And myself and Trudy and Caroline and Chase and Jay will be there to help answer any questions that we can answer. And if you all would like to be there to hear from the public, we will post those as notice of possible quorum meetings so that we don't get into that issue. But those dates are, let's see, I put them on the budget. I brought the budget calendar. August 6th, I think, is the first one, and it would be here at City Hall in the community room. And then the second one is at 6 o'clock. The second one we're planning for, let me get to my dates so I don't give you all wrong information. The second one we're planning is August 17th, and that's a Saturday, and that would be at 8:30 in the morning at PJ's. We're planning to have that there. And then the third and final road show would be on August 22nd, which is a Thursday night at 6 p.m. at False Idol Brewery. So the plan is to meet people where they are and kind of take it. This is what's in the proposed budget, and get their input. They will have opportunities. The public will have opportunities to provide their official input at those sessions. So meaning we'll have a QR code where they can go to. We always have on our website where people can give us input on the proposed budget and tax rate. Through that QR code, they can do that right there while they're looking at the proposed budget information. So that's part of the transparency, public engagement piece that we're interjecting into this budget process, and I think you'll see us do that in other ways as well as we go along. The other things I'm hearing is, of course, street maintenance, street construction. We are working on a plan to inject more money into our preventive street maintenance program. I'll say with that, one of the considerations we have to think about is whether we can complete all the work with the capacity that we have. So Public Works is an area that we have been short-staffed significantly for a number of years now. So there's that. We are contracting out more, but that's one of the areas where we want to interject more money, but we also have to consider whether we can make good on the promises to complete that work. Not just streets, but traffic safety is the other thing that we're hearing. So we are continuing to hire as many police officers as we can without lowering our standards for the type of person that we hire to fulfill those roles. So I think we're successful in that. We have several going through the academy now, and we also have several in training at this point. The other thing is I'm hearing compensation. for public safety and general services at levels to recruit and retain our staff. That's becoming more and more difficult for various reasons, depending on which side of the house you're talking about. But that is something that is a priority you'll see in the proposed budget, is to compensate our people within the market and to make sure that we're keeping up with that. Also, other things I've heard is revisiting the strategic plan, specifically the future land use portion of it. It's time to revisit Vision 2030 anyways. You usually try to update those every 5 to 7 years or so. So we will, there'll be funding for that in the proposed budget, and we'll roll out a plan to begin that process probably in the fall. So those are just some of the things that I've heard already, and that I want you to know that we're already looking at ways to work that into the proposed budget. So you will see those things in the proposed budget as we move forward. Again, as the mayor mentioned, some of the challenges that we're seeing right now is, again, the appraisals are likely going to come in flat. What we saw in June was lower than our certified tax rolls last year. What that means is that the no new revenue rate would be higher than even the current rate is now. We're hopeful, looking at past trends, that the certified numbers when they come in on July 25th will be even, at least. But that still means your no new revenue rate would be either about the same or maybe a little higher than the current rate. Understand, I'm not going to get into all of my commentary about the no new revenue rate, not the rate itself, but the tax rate calculation sheet. But that rate actually generates less revenue than the previous year, the way that they have it calculated. We'll get into that a little bit during the budget work session and when we walk you through the tax rate calculation piece. So today, though, it would be helpful to stay focused on the big picture and what you all want us to focus on, and hear you talk about those things in a way in terms of prioritizing, and have the majority of you tell us what you want us to focus on. So that's what I'm looking forward to today. I do want you to know, too, that Good to Great is also one of my favorite books. It has been. I'm not saying that just because the mayor said it. The staff is currently reading that book, and that's one of the reasons. I completely agree with comments about needing better metrics and measures in our budget and to show the public, and that's one of the reasons. Just so you know, we're kind of already having a behind-the-scenes discussion of heading in a very performance metric-based direction for all of our departments, and that'll include capturing all the data that we already harness, largely in some of our new technology, and making sure that we are monitoring that in a way to know where we are. So those are things. I don't know that this proposed budget will include great measures because it's just a matter of time. We haven't really had the time to focus on that, but I want you to know that is a direction that we're already taking it, which is why the staff is reading Good to Great. That is also one of my favorite quotes from the book, and that is, good is the enemy of great. We are good. We're a good city, and we have been and can be and will be great. We just you have to continue. You can't ever rest on your laurels, I guess. And that's part of what they talk about in the book. You're always looking for ways to improve. Part of that is confronting the brutal facts. There's been a lot of what I've called honest conversations going on in the organization, which have been good and productive. And a lot of that is confronting, brutal facts. And also focusing on the core business, that's a good to great thing as well. Those companies got great by not trying to do everything and be everything under the sun. They focused on what their core business was and what they were good at. And understand, though, that the city, in our various departments, we run about 15 different businesses, if you look at it that way. So we are working with directors to narrow down what is their core business and core functions in each department. So just wanted you to know that those kinds of things are in process. So just to kind of wrap it up, just as we focus on this big picture discussion today and end up with the results, when we I would just like to ask for time to bring back to you all recommendations. So with whatever big picture process that you have, I think education is a big component of that, and not just for the council and for us, but for the public as well. Our job as staff is really to give you our professional recommendations, the pros and cons of various decisions, confronting the brutal facts of some consequences of various actions, good and bad, so that you all, when you're making the final decision, you have all the information to make the best decision whatever decision you all think is best for our city and for our community. So I'm going to ask that we be allowed to do that in this process, give you those recommendations and work together with you in that process. And then again, it's the council's job to make the final decision, and then our job is to take that final decision and implement it. So this to me is a big step in moving forward in the budget process, and for me in finalizing the proposed budget before I present it to you all on August 2nd. So.
Thank you. Would you send us those dates? And two, would you consider finding a different venue than fall final? I don't think it's very accepted for some of our.
Okay, we can do that. Okay. Is it the brewery aspect, or is it just the location? Okay. 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 Yeah. We had copied that idea, just so you know, from some of our area cities that have their budget roadshow at some of their local breweries. But that we can do that.
or just as long as we have a diverse location.
Yeah, the goal was just to have it at various times. So there's one,
Sure.
There's two in the evening, there's one on a Saturday morning, so that people with different kinds of schedules can make it. So
What was
here.
What was the 6th was here, right?
Yeah, community room here.
The first one is City Hall, right here. Oh, PJ's, they're on Richland. Thank you, Paula.
Yeah.
Randy?
Good.
Your
Morning.
show. Morning.
All right, for those of you who I haven't met, my name is Randy Pennington. I have the honor of working with you all for the next couple of days. This is the kind of work that I do for a living. I've been doing this a long time. All this gray hair is real. It's not painted in to try to look older. That's not a problem for me. But, interesting that the mayor talked about good to great. So, like I said, in my journey in this, one of the things that got me into this work, that inspired me to take that first job in a small consulting firm when I got recruited away, I was a hospital administrator. I was involved in a startup hospital as running 8 departments for the first state-supported residential treatment facility for children and adolescents here in the state of Texas. In addition to that, I was also liaison to the Legislative Budget Board and to the legislature as part of that process. One of the reasons why we always got our budget funded by the Budget Board is that we were very metrics focused. We said, if you give us this, this is what we'll do. And amazing, we did it, and they said, oh, we have trust, we'll give you more. But when I first started in the consulting world, I got recruited out, and I'd read a book by 2 guys named Tom Peters and Bob Waterman. Some of you remember that book. It was sort of the very first business bestseller in the country. It was called In Search of Excellence. It was good to great before good to great. Then along came good to great. Subsequently, about 2006, I released a book called Results Rule through John Wiley and Sons. Did very well, not as good to great. If it had done as well as good to great, I might not be here today. But because Jim Collins is sitting somewhere up on the side of a mountain somewhere in Colorado right now. But all those things have in common some interesting things. First off, most of the companies in Search of Excellence 20, 30 years later were no longer excellent. Many of them weren't. If I look at the companies that I highlighted in Results Rule, not all of those are continuing to be excellent companies. If you look at good to great, not all of the companies in good to great continue to be good to great, continue to be great. Now, some of them do. One of the clients that I talk about in all my books is Sewell Automotive, because they're such a great company and they have a legacy of excellence that's generation after generation. But Carl Sewell told me one time, he said, the most important decision that we ever made in our business was the decision to be the best. Period. Not to be good, not to be above average, to be the best, by whatever metric that they go by to do that. And he said the thing about it is that once we decided to do that, it made things more focused, more profitable, and more fun. So I want to remind us of that as we go into this, that this is a continuing process of how we do business. The mayor talked about culture change. That can be scary sometimes. People think, oh, I don't want the culture to change. Well, let's kind of back that out. Several years ago, I got a call from a group that said, we need you to come in and help us. It's a group out in Arizona. We want to change our culture to be the Southwest Airlines of our industry. And I said, tell me why you want to change your culture. He said, well, when we get the Southwest Airlines culture, we'll start performing and behaving like Southwest Airlines. Now, that was back when that was a good thing. But I said, that sort of misses the point, because it's just the opposite. Culture change follows performance and behavior change, not the other way around. We change the performance, we change the behavior, it changes the culture. We can't just declare we're more open and transparent. People are too smart for that, aren't they? So we change the performance, we change the behavior. Culture change, culture is really the habits of an organization or of a community on display every day, all the time. So I just want to kind of frame that up. Now, as we go through today, by the way, one of my very favorite jokes of all time is this. This is one you can actually use, which is important. What does a snail say when riding on the back of a tortoise? Whee! Because perspective matters. Now, as we understand that, this is kind of frame, going back to good to great, one of the things that Collins talks about is having the right people on the bus to go ahead in the right direction, that you get the people on the bus. Well, regardless of what you thought about the election, whatever happened, the citizens have said these are the right people on the bus from an elected official standpoint. That's the message. These are the right people on the bus. As a council, as a staff, you have said at this point, we have the right leader on the bus. But now it's not important just to have them on the bus. We got to send them in the right direction. And that's where we're doing today, is now we got the people are here. Where's the bus going to go? And what's the strategy to get there? So it's important that we keep that from a perspective in mind. Does that make sense? By the way, you'll hear me ask that question a lot over the next 2 days. Does that make sense? I grew up in Greenville, Texas. Some of you knew that already. My dad was a retired diesel truck mechanic. He had a real job all of his life, unlike what I get to do for a living. And I called my dad up when I got to be a consultant and he said, Dad, I'm quitting my job. I'm leaving this place that I've worked and we're building this up and I'm going to become a consultant. And he said, what's that? And I tried to explain it to him. He didn't get it. And he said, I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, but I'm going to encourage you not to do it. I think if you'd ask him why, he would have said one of three things. First off, he didn't understand it. Second, he couldn't explain it to the guys he drank coffee with every morning at 10 a.m. at the Royal Drive-In on Wesley Street in Greenville, Texas. By the way, the Royal Drive-In on Wesley Street in Greenville, Texas looked exactly like the picture that you got in your mind when I said that. It was that place. But more importantly, I think he probably would have said he was afraid I'd lose all my money. I'd have to move back home. He'd have to support me again. That wasn't appealing to him either. So periodically, I would call my parents up from wherever I was traveling, and I would go home occasionally and take them out to eat at McDonald's so they know I could really afford to eat balanced meals and stuff. And he said, send me some information about what you do, and I sent it to him. And the next time I was home, we were having a cup of coffee with each other, and he said, I've read all that information, and I only have one question for you. Now, I don't know if you remember that experience, that time when you got to tell your parents and show your parents that you were a real adult. And he said, here's the question. I'm like, I'm ready. Shoot. And he said, they pay you to do this? And I said, yeah. And he said, it just seems like common sense. I said, guess what, Pop? You broke the code. Most of it is just common sense. But we've all worked in organizations before. Have you ever noticed that it's really easy not to allow common sense to get in the way of doing what we think we want to do? So the perspective I want to bring is bring some common sense to it. The other perspective is this. It's my very favorite quote about government. You'll hear it in the beginning, you'll hear it at the end. I think this is something I would like to ask that we all do. Government is a trust. The officers of the government are the trustees, and both the trust and the trustees exist and are created for the benefit of the people. Everybody, this is like one of those pinky swear things, right, Kim? Everybody buy that? Good. So we're here to do the work of the people. Why is this important? Well, we're going to focus on big picture policy stuff more than day to day. We plan the house, we draw the blueprint before we start laying the foundation, before we start throwing up the studs. I know it's really exciting to want to throw up the studs, but you have to know what it's going to look like in advance. Second, take a breath to appreciate what we've done, discuss and fine-tune, and then how are we going to move forward? Some deliverables at the end of the day. Reconfirmed our mission, strategic vision, goals, and objectives for the community. Now, I expect some of those are going to change. I think, quite frankly, they should change, even if they're just a tweak. Because remember, how many of you were voted to, those of you who are new, how many of you were voted in on the basis of just continue to do what they've always done? I didn't think so. So in other words, even if there are many things that we're doing good, because to your point, every one of you told me this is a good city. But visible change sets the tone. So I expect some things will change, even if it's just tweaked. By the way, you've got 4 new council members. I was with the city of Midlothian 2.5 weeks ago now. They have 1 new council member. It's still a new council if you have 1 or if you have 4, if you have 7. It's still a new council. So I think it's important that we talk about course of action on major issues and then provide some guidance on staff around accountability and urgency and what are those things. Tomorrow we'll be getting into what are those things that we absolutely need to focus on. What are those essentials, the must-haves? What are those things that, yeah, we want to do them, but they're not, if it all falls apart, these are some things that we could go sliding. And then, to your point, Mayor, what are those things that we should stop doing? So we'll get into that tomorrow. So this will be a process to kind of take us through that. So the agenda and the deliverables, you have the agenda right in front of you. This is a roadmap that will keep us moving forward. There will be times when I let you wander a little. Now, I don't mind you chasing rabbits. Those of you who've worked with me before know a little rabbit chasing sometimes can be helpful. Now, here's where I need your help. A little rabbit chasing is okay, but when your rabbit holes have rabbit holes, that's a problem. So I will be looking to all of you to say, all right, this is going too far. And some of that I'll look to the mayor and to Paulette and to, our attorney and that kind of stuff. I'm pretty good at keeping us out of things that we can't talk about legally. We don't have an attorney here today, do we?
No, we don't.
You made me
I was
look.
gonna
Yeah.
say, no.
All right, so trust me, I've been doing this long enough. I've been doing this long enough to know that there's certain things that we can't talk about. We can't take votes on things. Even though we can't, what's that?
Alicia will let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alicia will let us know. But even then, I'll just say I know we can't vote, but I need sort of some nods, right? I need to be able to get a sense of where you're headed. And sometimes you'll hear me say it from the standpoint, is there anyone who's like violently against this, right? So consensus doesn't always mean that it's 100% agreement. It just means that you can live with it. We can get there. So it's a little interesting here versus my private sector work. In private sector, I can usually point to one person and say, that person nods. Sometimes you count the votes, sometimes you weigh the votes. In your old company, if you nodded, everyone went, okay, right along.
Everybody argued with me all the time.
Right, but at some point, at the end of the day, one person makes a decision. Here we have a group of people that have to make a decision. And truthfully, the reality of a council is 4 votes. So I'm going to be looking for that consensus. Everyone okay with that? And just sort of give me some nods. All right, good. Some ground rules. Here's a ground rule I like for us to have. Be curious, not judgmental. You notice it says not Walt Whitman or Ted Lasso. Any Ted Lasso fans? Anyone watch Ted Lasso in here? Right, so you remember, as soon as I say that, you know what I'm talking about. It's the dart scene, right? He's in the pub and he's throwing darts, and he says all these guys were talking about it and never could figure it out, and I saw this quote by Walt Whitman. It said, be curious, not judgmental. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder if Walt Whitman actually said that. Turns out, no one knows for sure. No one can find that he actually said it. He might have said it, but no one knows for sure. It's one of those things that could have been said. But nonetheless, it's an important piece. Be curious and not judgmental. Fair enough? There's a lot to learn here. Second ground rule I'd like to throw out is the present should be guided more by the future than the past. Here's the thing I've learned in cities. Not this city, all cities. Every decision that frustrates you was at one point, probably 10 to 15 years ago, someone's good idea, well thought, well-intentioned idea to solve an important problem at the time. Let me give you a couple of examples. If you go out east, you see Garland, Texas. Now, if you drive along 635 and you look at Garland, Texas, what's your first impression? Garland's a fine community, by the way. Former client of mine, fine community. But what's your first impression of Garland? Yeah, right?
Box stores.
Interestingly enough, years ago, like in the late 70s, early 80s, I found out, Garland had a chance to have Town East Mall. Town East actually went to Garland and said, we'd like to go right out here on 635 and build Town East Mall. Now, Town East Mall has since been redeveloped and it's doing all kinds of stuff. But if you look at that area around Town East Mall, it's done pretty well. And the folks at Garland at the time said, why would we want to do that? Why would we want those people here? So they went down the road. Austin, Texas, some years ago, said, if we don't build roads, people will stop coming. Turns out they didn't build roads. People came anyway. You look at the city where I currently live. I live in Carrollton, Texas now. If you drive George Bush through Carrollton, you notice that all the exits are below grade and they go up. And that's because when George Bush was being designed, the feedback from the residents of Carrollton was, we don't want exits at grade because people might see it and get off. They might get off the freeway and stop and shop at our stores and fill up gas and do that kind of stuff. So if you look at that Four Corners, it's taken a long time for those Four Corners to develop out right there at Josie and there because of the decision. Well-intentioned, well thought out. If you look back on it now, 3 examples of probably not a great decision. I'd like for us to focus on the future. And if we can acknowledge that every decision that's been made in the past, however it's perceived today, was at one point someone's great idea or best idea to solve what was then an important problem. Is that a premise that everyone can at least acknowledge?
Sure. Absolutely.
Does that make it the right one going forward? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. One of the reasons why some of those companies are no longer excellent or no longer great is they started looking backwards more than they started looking forwards. Another perspective I want to offer to you. General Dwight Eisenhower. He actually did say this, I could verify it. Plans are worthless, but planning is everything. What do you think that means? Good, yeah.
Especially from his point of view, it's important to plan, but when you get to that situation, it depends to go.
Mike Tyson said it differently. Everyone has a plan until someone hits you in the mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
Does anyone remember what George W. Bush was doing on 9/11 that morning? Reading to kids. And that was the plan. That was the major focus of his administration, education. No child left behind. Changed just like that. City of Gladstone, Missouri is one of my clients for a number of years. They had a huge, wonderful strategic plan. They had focus. They were moving forward. And then a tornado came through and destroyed about a third of their city. Plans change. But the process of planning and thinking is critical. Because at some point, something's going to happen, and it's better to have thought of those things up front. So, before we go further, those are sort of my ground rules, hopefully that we can buy into. Does anyone else have any? Going once, going twice.
And I'd say just one.
Absolutely.
That everybody, and I know we can fly in at 30,000 feet, but sometimes I think what you said, which is, context, right? Sometimes understanding the context of certain things that were said, and when you bring them up, if you can provide context, that's very helpful. So I know we said we don't want to dive down too much, but flying over 30,000 feet is great, but we may not understand what it means without an example.
And it's okay to dip down.
Yeah.
Ideally we want to be at 30,000 feet, but I promise you sometime over the next 2 days, we're going to get at about 500. It always happens. The parking lot is now set. It's over there. You have Post-it notes at your table. At any point, some points I'm going to ask you to write some stuff down. We'll get them on the charts, and we'll use Post-it notes as a way to speed us up. But the other part is, if there's an issue that you want to put on the parking lot for later discussion, you can either put it on a Post-it note and give it to me, say parking lot, and I'll get it up there, or you can go write it yourself. Fair enough? Let's talk about breaks real quick. Typically, I check in about every hour to hour and 15 minutes and see where you are. Now, a couple of you wondering right now, okay, do we start like at 8:30 or is it, whatever? When do we start? Now, I'll honor that. On the other hand, you all know where the restrooms are, right out here and around. If you need more coffee, there's coffee and stuff in there, and drinks and water and what have you. If you need to take a break before we get to a break, or you need more coffee, or you have something that comes up in your life, you have to take a call or whatever, we understand that happens. We'll continue on unless 4 of you walk out, in which case we're on a break. So, that's the way it works, right? Right now, Blake's going like, yeah, okay. So, any questions so far? Any of you all want to say anything? We're going to talk about survey responses, then we'll take a break. But any of you got anything you want to? Good, let's jump into it. We sent out the extensive, thank you all for doing that. By the way, thank you all for making time to not only complete the survey, but also to speak with me. I had pages upon pages of notes. I'm just going to hit some high points. You have all of this in there, but I think it's important. This is sort of the referendum, if you will, from this group on how well we've done on the council's existing goals. That doesn't mean they're going to be your goals going forward, but I think it provides that context for how we get forward. And around police and fire and responsiveness, mostly good to excellent. By the way, let's talk about response time on fire and EMS. Your response time now is less than 5, right, Paulette? Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. On average.
On priority 1.
Yeah. By the way, that's excellent. And when you think about it, less than 5 minutes, it's pretty impressive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's your family member having a heart attack. Then 5 minutes feels like forever. That perspective matters. Could we get it to 2?
Well, we could, but, I mean, is it going to be cost beneficial?
Can you afford it?
Stations, everything else.
Right? So make sure, I'll say, I got to remind you all to make sure that we hit that. But yeah, to your point, Kelvin, it's exactly right. We could, but, what's the cost? So that's pretty good. Financial stability, again, mostly good to excellent. Nobody said poor. Fair is, I'll tell you that fair in this context is related to debt. And I know that you'll see this, it came up in our conversations, it came up on the survey. The fair aspects of it relate to debt, and how you use debt, how you have used it in the past, the questions around debt, and so forth. Community revitalization. Here you begin to see some good and excellent, but also you start to see a little over 50% of you said fair. And when you look at that one, what that really said, what you were really saying is that it's taken too much time. We haven't done enough. There's work to be done. That you want to move faster. And I took that as you want to move faster. Is that pretty accurate around that? Faster and more focused. Transportation system. Here you started to see some good and excellent, a lot of fair and poor. And here's what that one relates to. Streets. Street maintenance. Street reconstruction, street work. That starts, that whole issue is around streets. But I think that one is there. Now, it's also, I'm going to come up to this regional transportation planning. I'll come back to that one a little later. sense of community, parks, recreation, trails, everyone, this is when everybody went, we do amazing at this stuff. As a couple of you said in your comments, this is the best thing we do. We have great parks, we have great trails, we have a wonderful recreation system. Yeah. We do a great job at that. Now, let me also say that for several years previously, councils have emphasized that. And you see what happens. It's a matter of resource and attention went to that, and it worked. Positive city image. This one is interesting because we see, most people say it's pretty good, right? But one excellent, couple of fair, one poor. And this comes down to that feeling of inclusiveness and being, those who said fair or poor, one of the things that I heard and read from that is that you said this is the opportunity to how do we bring people in and make them feel more involved, more connected, more respected, more included. Any reaction to that one? Economic development, again, mostly good to excellent. Some fairs and poors. You have some economic development that, first off, you have some things that were planned that haven't started yet. Some of those things we can't do anything with. I'm curious, those of you that were in the campaign, how many of you had heard somewhere we need more restaurants, more entertainment, more that kind of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, everyone heard that. It's always an interesting dynamic. We all want those things. They don't always come just because we want them.
Button.
Hit your button, Russ.
I'm sorry. I think that ties back to the Park and Rec score. As a city, Park and Recs have been promoted very well and have done a great job in most cases. And I think now when the people that we have here enjoying the Park and Recs have the same mindset when it comes to entertainment and going out to eat, things of that nature. To me, those sort of run together.
It's a great perspective. Any other comment on that?
I think, and I know one of my comments was about I think we have taken the position of we need more bodies, we need higher income, we need something else to succeed. I think we undersell where we are in the overall look in Northeast Tarrant County, especially to say, hey, we're better than we want to sell, and the reason we can't sell is because because we just have to have more head count. Well, that's not true because Watauga right on the other side of the road over there, and Hurst on the other side of the road over there gets some of the things that we would really like to have, and they have lower income and less people. So it's not a good excuse, and I know the difference between reasons and excuses.
So one of the things around retail is that the city you're in is actually further down on their list than we think. Now, if you're in Wichita Falls, okay, that's fine, but there's nothing else around Wichita Falls. So the city you're in is contextually that way. But if you think around here, there's probably an intersection here that, we could throw a rock and hit 2 or 3 different cities. Yeah. So at that point in time, is the city you're in the defining factor? Maybe not. It's the location that you're in first, because they all draw a little circle and they go, how many people are within our ideal driving distance? And then they get down to other things. And then they get down to the city. And this is, you think, so to your point, Mayor, well, we can't control where they go. But we kind of can, because all things being equal, they choose places. It's like, I can choose this city, or this city. Which one's going to make it the easiest for me to do that? Which one is going to have the space I can do the most with? Which one has the location that I can work with? So, you know, it's not the defining factor, but we can somewhat influence it.
I just want to say, I think this is one part where we can dig into the idea of maybe saying it where perfection could be the enemy of great. A lot of times I think just if our job is to do code enforcement or something like that, or set permits and whatever, we may get so good at that we create barriers or obstacles to businesses wanting to do business here. And so I don't know what the right response or where to set the bar exactly, but at a certain point, I think the bar with our bureaucratic system is set so high at being so good at our jobs that the businesses looking at our city just say, I don't want to deal with that. So just a
Good
different
observation.
perspective.
And I'll give you, by the way, some of this changes over the time. I'll point you north a little bit from here and a little kind of east, I guess, to the city of Flower Mound. I'm not sure how many of you have watched Flower Mound over the years, but from an economic development standpoint, they've swung. At one point, they were, we want to make it so tough to be here that no one will come. And they were. And then people said, we ought to have more stuff here. And they made some important changes to develop daytime population, to bring in the sorts of restaurants and what have you they wanted. They wanted nice restaurants, but they realized they have 93% of their population drove out of town every day. And when they came back, their kids in schools going to soccer practice and football and baseball practice. And after that, you're not going to go take those kids to a nice sit-down restaurant. You're going to go through Chick-fil-A or a pizza place. And that's what they had. So it swung to the point of, we really want to develop economically so that it will pull some of that other stuff for daytime. And then that changed. And then they started moving back a little more. Now, for the city management staff in the place, you can track this. So at a time when they were being very restrictive, Harlan Jefferson was the city manager there. Then they wanted to move back into more of that development standpoint, and Harlan left, and they replaced him with the city manager who was very, very good at economic development. He's amazing at it. He's one of the best in the business. And then the council switched, kind of moved back the other direction, and he went to another city because, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a matter of he aligned. They get alignment around that, right? And then they were there, and so now they started moving back to being a little more restricted. So communities go through that cycle around that. Susie?
You know, what I was going to say about that is we've been like that, I think. Those that have lived here a long time, the 80s, you think back in the 80s, you know, when you were, you know, young, when we were all young.
Out of high school, but
yeah,
yes,
out of,
I'm
high,
still
out of
young.
high school, and we were young. You know, we had that. Yeah, right. But you know what I'm saying? You know, we were the North Richland Hills was a place where everybody from Colleyville, Southlake, Keller, all that came to dine. We had Steak and Ale. We had Bennigan's. We had Red Lobster's been there forever, and that was one of the top places. We didn't have Papados yet. That wasn't even in the picture, and that all was there. So I think we are that pendulum, And being one of the older rings from the county seat, we have to be cognizant, like you said, for the future, and not say, well, this is what we had, this is what we had. We got to figure out, okay, we need to have it again, and how do we get there? I, for the life of me, can't figure out why some of these places won't come in, but then I look at my own habits. I look at my own personal habits on where I want to dine, how I want to dine, what time of day I want to dine, and that's a huge thing. And we had a lot of those when other places didn't, and now we're kind of fighting to get those back, I believe. That's how I feel about it, and we need it. We need to.
Development's an interesting thing. You know, you were sort of one of those first growth rings. Inner ring suburbs are an interesting dynamic in and of themselves, because by nature, all the new concepts are going to go to where the new construction is. They follow that. That's sort of the nature of the beast. They're following that. And if they go to a dynamic, if they're looking for a cohort that is younger, more family-oriented, if they're looking for younger and single, are they going to come to North Richland Hills if that's their cohort? Probably not. Right? You're not going to be, you know, we're not going to confuse, probably at this point, North Richland Hills with 6th Street in Austin. Nor do you want to.
Yeah, thank God.
No.
Right. Right. On the other hand, you know, if you look at why Steak and Ale was here, and Bennigan's and Red Lobster and all those places, we were sort of that outer ring, and all the growth was moving out there. And now they're chasing the growth, just like they always do. If you read in the news yesterday, Kroger and Albertsons are trying to merge, and they listed all the stores. They're going to sell 26 grocery stores in Texas to make the merger work. Yeah, including the Tom Thumb will change if this is approved. This Tom Thumb, and so again, that's part of the dynamic of the world. It is the capitalist world that we live in. It's what makes it great, and it's what makes it frustrating all at the same time.
If I flip that conversation just a little bit, I believe post-COVID world is different than pre-COVID world in so many aspects. I believe people live places now because of social, not because of financial. Because you can choose where you want to live because you choose how you want to work, versus before. Is that trend going to come back? I don't know. If Elon Musk gets his way, I guess it will. But having had, 800,000-900,000 people at the insurance center at, Precinct Line and Grapevine Highway, those were heavily supported restaurants right in the front, especially in the day, which was good because we left for lunch, right? And we ate there. United Healthcare / Health Markets / UICI / whatever you want to call it, really switched and said, we're going to get rid of real estate. And they, that building is now, struggles to have occupancy. And United Healthcare up in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, right outside of Minneapolis, one 12-story building is probably empty now that they own up there because they pushed everybody home in a dramatic fashion, and we did as well. I had 800-900 people in Plano in my building, and we were 3 full floors, 60,000 square feet a floor, and we were, big footprint. And now they're 1 floor on half of it, right? And everybody else is home. And so they're living more of where they want to live. And I believe now it's the build it and they will come versus based on, I love the fact we have the heat maps and we do all the stuff we do. I believe it's the other way around from a mentality perspective. I want to be there because chicken and pickles there, right? I want to be there because that place is there. So I'm going to move there because of that. Versus what's there, and we're going to put things there. I think restaurants need to start thinking a little differently, as well as entertainment venues, on how I'm going to attract people there versus am I H Mart in Haltom City, we'll just use that as an example. It's 85% pre-leased out, and they haven't, well, they barely broke ground, right? So that it's, it depends on the product you're offering, whether you're coming or not.
Yeah, and I think that was, I guess the mayor kind of said a few things I was going to say, but, attracting and retaining businesses, I think we're all business friendly here, and we have kind of a mindset there, but it's also the type of businesses too. I mean, if we wanted to, we could open it up and have vape shops and CBT shops on every corner.
And nail
But
salons.
that's not the.
Don't forget nail salons.
Yeah. So we could have that, but then we also need to figure out, okay, well, we also hear from the citizens, we want to revitalize, Roof Snow as an example. Roof Snow was built in the 80s, it's concrete from here to here. We want to put in some regulations to try to, whether it's lighting, just came up in the last council meeting. Do we want to try to revitalize that, or do we want to try to satisfy bringing in new businesses? So there's kind of that fine line that we need to walk between those two.
Randy, just to add to the discussion. One is, it's also, to Kelvin's point, that was a great segue, thank you. It's a balance of standards. So being one that worked in a community adjacent to Flower Mound when Harlan Jefferson became the city manager, it was a shift of the council, but it wasn't necessarily about keeping people out. It was about development standards. Mm-hmm. And so there is a balance, though, because I do think you can get to a point where your standards are so high that the ROI is not good for any business to have to comply with those. So I think it's a balance of standards. I'll say it's, you heard Randy talk about this change of city managers, and that's council directed, really, based on what their philosophies are. But so I appreciate you saying that you don't want to get rid of me yet, at least.
Yeah. Well, unless you believe the rumors, so, it's.
And then also the demographics swing, and then yes, 2020 changed the world. So, and I think still 4.5 years later, we're still all adjusting to that. But, and when I say the demographic swing, the information that I sent out to y'all yesterday about how restaurants and retailers are, look, the first things they look at when they're selecting a location is what that is, and one of it was young families, or their access to young families. And our demographics, just like any community, have switched over the years. I think that we're changing again to more young families, and the reason I say that is I've seen it in my own neighborhood. We moved in there in 2014, and our kids were some of the youngest kids in the neighborhood at the time. And now I've seen a lot, my kids are growing up and moving out, but I've seen a lot of young families move in to that neighborhood just in the last 5 years. So I think we're shifting again, which helps, but also to the mayor's point, and all of y'all kind of said this in some form, and that is, we have to do a better job selling our story and not just let the demographics on paper, think that tells our full story, because I don't think it does. And that's a conversation that Craig and I have a lot about, and meetings have started about. It's not just putting the demographics in front of the places. It's personal, in face-to-face meetings, in-person meetings, to tell what the true story is about our community. Again, but there is a balance between the standards. So if you have no standards, that's why the councils shifted in various cities, because they hear from their community, whatever that is that just came in, it's ugly. And so it's a balance.
Yeah, and that changes over time, and it's hard to get it right. I mean, we all kind of believe, a good example. Zoning, most of us conceptually believe in the idea of zoning, right?
Sure. Yeah. We're not from Houston.
Yeah. So Houston's a great example. Houston's very much is people's property. It's there. Several of you told me, we believe in property rights, and I know you all do. At the same time, total property rights means we have zero zoning, and we end up with Houston. So that finding that balance is the sweet spot. And that shifts and adjusts. By the way, my observation is this: COVID certainly changed some things, but it accelerated everything. I can't tell you how many of my clients put in their 5-year IT plan in 5 months.
Oh, yeah.
During COVID. They went from everything is backed up on servers to everything was in the cloud. Think about it, almost like this. It was like, it's the CIO Full Employment Act for was COVID. It accelerated that. It accelerated the fact that place matters. We were moving in that direction anyway. I mean, we've been on this path of people follow jobs to jobs following people. We were already on that path. This accelerated what that meant even further. Let's hit a couple of these others really quick before we take a break. Most of you thought we did a overall good job at maintaining who we are, our facilities, our infrastructure, promoting a culture of service that attracts and retains staff. Paulette mentioned compensation and staff and what have you. This is it's a seller's market for talent. And some of it's maybe COVID driven, but a lot of it's demographic driven. 11,000 baby boomers retire every single day. The cohort that comes behind them are just Gen Xers. I'm sure how many of you there just aren't that many of you. Yeah, there aren't that many of you. Millennials, there are, more than Gen X, but still not a huge amount. That will absolutely drive automation to be able to keep things done. Local and regional leadership. Now, this is one that came up quite a bit. I will tell you that you're one of the very few cities that I've seen set this as a goal. Just in general. Not that people aren't interested in that, but it's that you're one of the very few that have set this as a goal. And by the way, you've heard me say that before. You're one of the very few that said, and that's, the idea is here, we want to be involved in regional issues to help set the tone. And part of that comes back to a lot of things are happening in the region. We don't want that. We don't want to be away from the table. We want to be at the table, influencing it for our purposes. Now, that's the good side. The bad side of that is but what about us? So I think the idea of local and regional leadership is an important one because, again, we're not an island out here in the city, in the middle of nowhere. On the other hand, finding that spot to say, like I said, most cities don't say it as openly as you have. And Tito, you see other cities, they don't say it as openly as you guys have. We'll get into this, but basically this looked at the previous goals, and I asked you, should it be, definitely be, nice to have, rather have to have, I don't have a strong opinion, and definitely should not. Interestingly enough, almost all of you said these goals are things that we ought to have. The one example where it's not is local and regional leadership. You have some absolutely we ought to have it, some saying it's a nice to have. We don't have to have it. It's a nice to have. A couple other people say I don't have a strong opinion, and then no, it shouldn't be a goal. So that'll be an opportunity for you to decide direction-wise. But nobody, as I expected, nobody's going to say, oh, we don't want to be safe and secure. But most of these things are on here. Everybody was going like, yeah, these are not bad goals. Did that surprise any of you?
No.
efficient and effective transportation system, does that include roads? I can't remember.
Yes.
Okay, then I guess that surprised me a little bit then, that it's
So
so
this-
much of the nice to have, because.
So I think if you looked at it from,
Perspective.
Yeah,
I think if you look at it from efficient, effective delivery of services, you could look at streets as part of that. I think where it came on the nice to have probably came around the transit-oriented TOD work.
Yeah.
That's where it probably showed up, because that was included in there as well.
Randy, can I make a comment
Sure.
on this? Okay, so from the way that I see it, because each one of us sees all of these a little bit differently. Some were, exactly the same, some were a little different in how we see them. But when I look at, especially on efficiency, effective transportation system, and local and regional leadership, it's that quote about the present is for the future, not from the past. But we have to also, we look at the past in order to make what we want to do in the future. So I'm always kind of looking out further for the kids that are coming up, the kids that are coming up, and a lot of them choose to stay in the community. Ricky's from this community, Jack's from the community, Blake, Russ, and of course, Tito and Blake, Blake over here. I meant Matt over there. Matt's from
Blake.
here. Like, of course, we got here as fast as we could, right?
Again, they shouldn't sit together.
And that's something that I think I think all of us think about, but getting the day to day, what we're experiencing day to day, sometimes interferes with how we want to plan for the future, because we have to get through today. I mean, that's where we are, but we also have to look at that, and that's where, when I was looking at those, thinking about the whole picture of what's going to happen in the future, how do we lay the stepping stones, the path for those that are going to come after us, so we don't want them to have a mess, to deal with.
That's, by the way, is the challenge for every single
It's
business.
very much a challenge. Well,
Every city, every school district, every business, that challenge of how do I execute today and be ready for tomorrow.
and if the
is hard.
if the leaders back in the 50s and the 60s in this area hadn't gotten together, in Arlington, the mayor in Arlington and all that, if they had not gotten together, that airport might not be here, and this whole area would look completely different. It would not look the way it does today if that airport had been moved somewhere else. But they came together and had a foresight that we need to have this airport. That was a big undertaking, and I know it was, I was little once, Jack. I was
Understand.
little at the time.
We all were.
So, I think about all of that, and that's just how I think and look at it. So that may be why we come up with some different perspectives.
Well, the past, by the way, one of you said this back to me, and it's this quote that I've used. It's not that the past isn't important, but there's a reason that the windshield in your car is larger than the rearview mirror. It's like we got to acknowledge it because we don't want to make those mistakes, but so I'll give you an example. You're talking about one of the things here, and to the point, every community is different. I'm working with a community down, an inner ring suburb down near Houston. So it is inner ring like you, but it's near Houston, about the same population size as you. And at their planning session in February, the mayor said, I think in 10 years our population will have doubled, and most of it won't be through single-family home ownership. It will be multifamily and single-family rental. And here was his thought. And he admitted, he said, admittedly, I have a small population size, but I have 2 kids in their 20s, none of whom want to own a home. What they want a nice place to live, but they don't want to own a home. They want flexibility. They want to be able to move when they need to. They want to worry about I don't want to keep up a yard. I don't want to, Now, if you look at the trends, there are a number of folks who are like that. One of my clients happens to be the largest owner of single-family rental property in the country. They're one of those big corporate institutional guys. I haven't worked with them long. I'm just starting to. But they have about 1 million homes either owned or managed across the country. Do a little over $2 billion in revenue. Leasing houses. And the interesting part is 30% of all of their residents, most of who are in that millennial cohort, rent by choice because of lifestyle. So, there's some change that's going on with that. I'm not sure, now, that just because Steve Jobs at Apple said of all the things that he did at Apple, it's that some of the things he was most proud of were the things they decided not to do. So we could say, great, there is that cohort out there that wants to do that. That's probably not our customer. Our customer is those that want it. That's okay to say that. But I think there's some, to your point, things are changing, right? There's a new demographic out there. How many of you have teenagers who don't want to get their driver's license? Any of you experienced that?
I didn't have that.
Yeah. Yeah, think back when you were a teenager, Ricky. Did you want to get your driver's license?
I did, yeah, it wasn't the top of my mind.
But, yeah.
I was driving before I had a license.
Yeah.
Yeah, so right, it's one of those changes that happen. So we all kind of get it. I'll hit this when we take a break. Let's stop and take, I don't know how long you want, 10?
Sure.
10 minutes?
10 minutes.
Let's stop and take a 10-minute break. Because I want to there's a lot of things that you're proud of that I want us to acknowledge. And there's some things that we got to work on. So let's go through those real quickly when we get back. Tito?
Just so you know, I've got to leave about 10, 15.
Okay. All right.
That's
So
right. Yes.
you can either take 10 and come back for 5 minutes, or you can. And I always want to bring this up because there are two ways we get better. One way is the way we learned in school, probably from our parents. If you were one of those kids that brought home 4 A's and a B, what did your parents, or for some of us 4 C's and a D, works both ways. Did your parents focus on the 4 A's or did they focus on the B?
I focused on the B.
The B, right? The B. Now, yeah, and so even though the B might have been in art and you were killing it in all the STEM subjects.
It was home ec.
Or home ec, right? Yeah, your B was in home ec, and you were killing though math and science and everything else. That's what we focus on. So we get it. There are things we need to improve on. But the other way we get better is find things that we're really good at and find ways to leverage those more effectively. Going back to my days growing up out in East Texas, one of the sayings that I always heard is it's much easier to ride a horse in the direction that it's going. Now, which makes it hard if you want to change directions, makes it harder, but there are things that we do well. And so I think it's important to acknowledge this. There is a sense of community here. TexRail and TxDOT, TOD developments are a positive for people who want that lifestyle. Now, the balance is for the folks who don't want that lifestyle. Not that everything works in all the places. We also have larger plots of land, though, with a country look and feel to them. Good growth, city staff in most cases cordial and represent our city well, the library and NRH Center, the parks and trail system. You've had economic development gains, City Point development, Peppa Pig, new dining opportunities that are there. By the way, let's talk about City Point development. Is this development down here fully realized yet? And how long has it been open? So a couple of years. And when you think about how long it takes to fill things out, and oh, by the way, we had that COVID deal going on, right, too. So, yeah, it's one of those, it's a great area of opportunity. In many cities, think about in small towns, city hall, courthouse, county seat drives development around it. I mean, that's kind of the normal way of doing things. And so this is an opportunity, even though you've done some things well. Parks and recreation, great place to raise families. That'll come back up later. Quality of life events, high quality for cities, citywide communication. Let's chat for that for a second. A couple of you mentioned that as a positive. A couple of you mentioned that as a negative. So just be, yes.
Can I just comment to that on the citywide communication? You know, I think it's gotten better, but our communication overall, not just within cities, but communication in and of itself has rapidly changed. And because of that, we expect things faster, instantaneous, and we are all playing catch up with that because there's so many different ways to communicate now. When originally it was word of mouth, then there was a newspaper, then there was a radio, and then you had radio and newspaper, and then you had a TV, and then you had telephone. We have so many ways, and I think our
Pony Express was in there somewhere too.
Yeah, Pony Express, yes, the Wells Fargo, right? So that is will continue to always change. You know, as we move forward, we think about our cars. Our cars are an office because we have everything there that we need to communicate now. And there's probably still some other ways to communicate. Yeah.
One of the things is our citizens don't compare our communication against other cities. They compare it against the communication they experience in every other area in their life.
I'll say this, being in the college and university space for where we sold for United Healthcare, the standards for responsiveness on anything, I guess I should say, really anything. I would get emails, hate mail from college students that it took almost a full second to get a response on one of my websites for an information they needed. And I'm like going, for real? Because that's their expectation, right? I mean, very different than our expectation because I waited for the paper to hit the driveway.
You're exactly right. So, again, it's one of those moving targets. The other one, this last one is an interesting one because I think it rings true from what I see in this room. When you grow up in NRH, you want to stay in NRH. Let me stop for a second and just let that sink in. Years ago, I would drive out on Interstate 30 toward Greenville when my parents were still living there. And there was this big sign out on the interstate that said, Destination Greenville. And I looked at that sign every time and thought, for what? Because when I grew up, every one of my friends, they were looking at it, you know. Mac Davis wrote a song years ago, Happiness is Lubbock, Texas in the rearview mirror. That was sort of the way it was. By the way, it turned out Greenville was in fact a destination. At that point in time, they had the only Walmart in the county. And on Saturdays, that place was hopping. But just to realize that thing right there is really special. Now, there were some things that you said where we missed the mark. This list is longer. Street maintenance. By the way, I didn't repeat those of you that said, so I didn't repeat things because more than one of you said street maintenance, okay? Revitalization, code enforcement, businesses that are past deadline for opening, police department hires and retention. Several of you mentioned that. More efficiency as a priority. Codes and permitting regulations, restaurants and entertainment. Overbuild of apartments instead of family-focused living. Hotels, still waiting for construction, more focused on deteriorating parks. Revitalization, more mid to upscale dining. Speeding traffic and red light runners. We've started addressing that one a little bit. South Side redevelopment, but isn't proceeding as quickly as planned. Attracting new businesses, especially restaurants. Burdens, Matt, you alluded to that earlier, making it easy for people to do business with us. Lack of transparency into the staff culture, inclusiveness, communication, affordable single-family homes, misplaced priorities. Let's talk about affordable single-family home. One of the exercises, I think we did it with you all in the past, but I know we've done it with some other cities. How much would a house have to cost here for it to pull its own weight as far as cost of services delivered versus cost of revenue generated? Anyone thought about that? Everyone just write down what that house would have to cost. Just it makes it sort of net revenue neutral. Well, we're not for profit, so we're not trying to make money, but it's sort of a net neutral. Have it in your head? What do you think would have to be, Susie? 250? 250? Mayor? 350? Blake? Yeah? No clue, Russ? 425? Paulette? Now, if you think about what an affordable house is, it's a matter of perspective, right? Think of what a $250,000 home buys today. Right? What's that, Russ? Yeah. There are places to buy $250,000 homes, but they're not this close to downtown. And I would look at it that way. It's really not this close to downtown. So, affordable, now, by the way, it doesn't mean we shouldn't have that, but just realize that if we have homes that are selling in the 250 to 325 range, they probably aren't paying for themselves. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have them. It just means that we need to be able to supplement that revenue some other way. There's got to be another revenue stream. So if you think about successes and missed opportunities, anything else that we missed, having thought about it?
You know, I want to touch on one thing that Blake had said, and it's kind of around the edges. But when I was meeting, and these were interesting conversations, by the way. I was meeting with both the fire and the police associations during the campaign, or even a little bit before it really started. The first 30 minutes was to talk about themselves, and then the next 30 minutes was to tell me how difficult it is to get a restaurant to come in North Richland Hills. And I finally, after a lot of conversation, I asked them, why are we having this conversation with the firemen and the policemen? And the fireman said, well, we all have second jobs, and we know how hard it is to permit in North Richland Hills, and we prefer any other city around here. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you do, don't you? I mean, and they said, it's hard. They said the permitting process is hard, which is and the reputation is there that it's hard, and the restaurants say it's just as easy to be on the other side of precinct line in Watauga or the other side of the line at Hearst, which Hearst is easy, than it is to be here. So I get the same demographic across the street without the grief. And that was I thought that was a very salient point. And then when I responded to them after the election, told them, everything's all good. The response was, make it easier to get more restaurants now. I mean, so that was the important part of the conversation that we had. It wasn't them. That was the important part of the conversation.
I think it's important.
Well, let me add a little bit to that. I think that there was a time, probably back 20 years ago, 10 years ago, where we needed to be stringent, like you were saying earlier. But I think we're at a point where, as far as build out, is basically a past thing for the city. So we're looking at now current, what we have now to revitalize it and to redevelop what we have. And so I think what we consider today to be over stringent rules going to have to be adjusted to match what our need is now compared to what it was 20 years ago when those rules were implemented. Time changes things, and we have to take that into consideration.
I'll jump in too. I want to clarify too, especially for the staff in the room, that we are not talking about, we're not saying that staff is doing a bad job. We're saying we have excellent staff, and we want to maybe change the priority is what I'd like to see. It's not that you're doing the wrong thing. It's that I want to change what you're doing in a different direction. Does that make sense? Okay. So don't get me wrong. Like, oh, you guys are causing problems. You're stifling our businesses coming here. No, you're doing a really good job. I just want to shift the focus.
You're doing exactly what we've asked you to do.
Yes. Right.
Now we're going to ask you to do something different.
And to that point, it's in the line of the whole discussion of today, understand that the role of staff is to do and enforce what is on the books currently in all areas. That's our job. So even to the extent of, I know last meeting, when Clayton was talking about the strategic plan and how it applied to a particular case, and I leaned over to the mayor and said, remember that the strategic plan, that's Clayton's job, is to represent the strategic plan that we have in place. Also, that plan was approved in 2019 when we were getting a ton of garden office and a ton of requests for garden office, and then 2020 happened. So there is some, again, to the point earlier, there is some adjustment that needs to be made on the strategic plan. But to your point, Blake, I appreciate you saying that, because our job is to do what's on the books. And then, yes, if you change it, then our job's to do whatever you changed it to. I also, in regards to permitting it specifically, we've had a change in staff in our building inspections department, particularly with our building official. And process improvement has been something that we've been trying to focus on in that area for a couple of years now. This staff change will allow us to accelerate that. I'm just going to say it that way. So that's already in the works. That doesn't mean we're backing off of whatever's on the books now. It just means that the process internally that we kind of have control over, we're making strides and making it easier already. So,
also like to bring up too that a lot of stuff we're coming from or saying comes from directly door knocking and physically talking to human beings. And so 3,000, 6,000, 7,000, that's a lot of people saying, hey, we've seen this, we want this. I also talk to a lot of young people around my age who obviously COVID changed dramatically the way of lifestyle. Back in the day, they wanted to live next to where they work. Now they don't have to. They don't mind driving from here to Carrollton or whatever. And so now it's about how do I raise a family? And then like your other company, which I take, they're like, well, young people just want to not own anymore. I obviously their business is to rent, but there's a lot of people now that they do want to own and they want to plant seeds and grow their family here. It's going to be obviously the down payment that always gets you every single time. But anyways, a lot of the ideas, a lot of what we're saying too is people literally are telling us this.
Yeah.
We didn't do a survey 3 years ago and we're just kind of reusing that information. We've talked to people, so that's where a lot of this is coming from. So just FYI.
And just realize, to Paulette's point, a change in direction from you, council, changes action for them. They start, that follows it. There can be ripple effects and sometimes unintended consequences. Several of you mentioned we need more code enforcement. One of my city clients dramatically wrapped up their code enforcement a few years back. And then they were surprised when there was a backlog in city court of people challenging citations. So, right? It's just, there are always consequences. Let me give you some observations from my interviews. Take these for what you will. First off, I didn't talk to any one of you that believes North Richland Hills is completely broken. On the other hand, those of you who are parents, do you have to be a bad parent to want to be a better parent? Well, of course not. We don't have to be unhealthy to want to be healthier. We don't have to be broken to decide that we want to be better every single day. But I want to set that, just to sort of level the conversation. I also said that every single one of you here wants to contribute to NRH's success. I didn't talk to a single person who said, my goal is to tear this place down. That's important. Campaigning makes working as a team more challenging, at least in the beginning. Now, again, perspective matters. Compared to other places in the country, your election was normal. Compared to North Richland Hills, this election was different. Right? It's a matter of perspective. So, council, one of the questions for you is you're going to have to decide. Do you work as a team? We'll talk about what that means. Or are we simply a group of individuals who respectfully work together while representing our constituent views? By the way, either one of those works. And I've seen groups where we want to be a team. I've seen groups who say, no, we're just a group of individuals that we come together, we vote where we can, coalitions change, constituent views drive things. It's a somewhat more partisan process based upon the tough part is when not everybody knows which game we're playing. So, let me ask you, because there were some comments on your survey. These are things that popped out. Creation of perception of us versus them. There's the idea that people don't want to be heard or informed what we want with their tax dollars. Having conversations that say we're about to become Halton City are wrong in so many ways. That we need to raise the standard of conduct for people who serve on boards. The hope that, we're not that we're independent voices. Staff promised to present details on an efficiency audit in December. Still don't have that yet. Paulette addressed that. We shouldn't seek to hide or manage information. Council has to be above reproach. Those are all things that were talked about in your survey. Let me just ask the question. Are you guys, is this a team? Is it a group of individuals? Kind of gets into the role of council and staff and how you want to operate.
I think it's both. I mean, we're a team that's coming together for the benefit and betterment of NRH, but we each have different perspectives on different things, and we're each going to vote according to that and what we feel like, the citizens say and want. So I think it can be both. I mean, what you don't want to have is, like to our neighbor to the east, large city, and it's just like a dogfight every time they get into a city council meeting, in Dallas, for example. So, I prefer not to have something like that, but I think we each bring our own perspectives.
I think what's really interesting in my past, 19, 20 months or so, maybe it's not that long, I've experienced kind of both settings. When I came in, nobody knew me, right? Everybody's kind of making their opinions right there. I think maybe I came in and a lot of people had they thought I was going to be a certain way, and then we got along great for a good 7 months or something like that, right? I thought we had a great working relationship, and to me, it changed when things started to go off the rails, or I guess what I'm saying is, when I felt like I was no longer able to participate fully, or when I felt like I wasn't able to completely discuss things that I wanted to discuss, right? Which I thought was why we were elected, was to say, this is what I'm hearing, and I want to present all of this. And I read our code of conduct, and it says we're supposed to talk about things fully, thoroughly, and then that wasn't happening constantly. And then when I see that there's rules that are, we've said, hey, these are the rules that we will play by, each of us in this room. And these rules start to change when some people don't like the way it's going. It created contention where there was no contention. We had 6 to 8 months of just good, healthy, everybody being on the same page. Disagreements, we voted on things differently. I think we're 98% of the time we all agree on what we're talking about, 98% of the time. And but we disagreed. Chickens in February and all that stuff. It's just a disagreement. That's fine. But the problems come when we start using the system to take advantage of people, or changing the rules in order to stifle communication. And I think those are the areas that we need to be sensitive of. I have never asked for anyone to agree with me. I'm going to make my case, and I hope you agree with me, but I want to be able to talk about things fully. And I can't tell you how many times I'd be in the middle of a conversation, and then it would just get shut down. Nope, we're done talking about this, goodbye. And that creates contention, because it says, I don't have a seat at the table. I'm not really a full member here, right? So as far as what we're talking about here, can we work together, right? I absolutely think we can, because I've seen it already before. I've seen a great, healthy working relationship with people that I disagree with. We just need to make sure that we treat people fairly, that we give everyone the opportunity to talk. We don't have to agree with them, that's fine. And I think that would be healthy for everyone.
Yeah, I come to the point of, I think what Kelvin said, you kind of had a little bit of both. We can't be one solid team, because now we're thinking brain trust. Now we're thinking like we're doing one thing and that's it. We are individuals with different ideas, perspectives on governing. They're all individual elections. We don't run as a group 1 and group 2 and group 3. So we are going to be individuals in our thought processes. The definition of governing is concessions at the end of the day. So you had to, like Mr. Vaughn said, we got to make the case. But we can't sit here and be like we're on the team Texas Rangers and we're all a solid team, because as that's the definition. The team means we're all going to do exactly the same thing. No, and I don't think anybody would want that from any local or any type of government in this country. It's going to be individually. So that's, I think, Calvin probably said, but you're going to have best both worlds. I want to work great with each other. Obviously, no one wants a fight. No one wants. If you want that, go to Austin or go to the UK Parliament right now. You can watch that all day long like that. That's not what we're talking about. Yeah, so or Congress, yeah, right now. It's going to have 7 different unique viewpoints that someone has to concede for governing. So that's where I come from. We're going to have best of both worlds.
I agree with a lot of that. I know when I sat down, one of the first times after the election, I sat down with Paulette and we were talking, and I told her, I said, look, I would much rather have people argue with me than agree with me. And I told her, I said, look, I'll step on everyone's boundary like bad, but I need you to tell me when you feel like I've gone out of bounds. And she goes, are you sure? I said, we don't have to do it publicly, but okay. I said, but I said, in order for us to have a give and take relationship, I said, I said, I'm gonna push along on things. I said, but I want to still create an atmosphere where we can come to agreement on things. Because if you notice how I answered a lot of the questions, is I don't know whether to agree with this or not. I don't really want a tax increase on people, but if we've got a really good reason, I'll be the first one to go out there and sell the idea of why I'm doing it. I need metrics, I need information. I have to stand by from an integrity perspective of what I believe, but I have to be supported in that, and I have to understand how to support that. So and I know a lot of them, a lot of my comments were really on kind of sometimes even on both sides and saying, no, I think that's a terrible thing to do. I did find a couple of things insulting, by the way, but I'm willing to learn to support that if I understand why, right? I mean, I'm still going to have my ideas and where I want to go with it, but I don't want to argue for argument's sake. I want to argue to get to somewhere.
So one of the challenges, do you have something else? No. One of the challenges is understanding how groups deal with conflict. And there is a perception out there that a team never has conflicts. And that's not true. So, my wife and I had been married for 36 years. We, on the other hand, both had starter spouses. No, there's not an easier way to say it than that. And I don't know about hers, but I know about in mine. When my first wife and I decided that it was no longer going to work for us to remain together, our friend said, but you never fought. And after some reflection, and I said, and that was the problem. Because we weren't aligned on what we were trying to accomplish together in our family, and so we just didn't care enough to fight. Now, my wife of 36 years, we banged some heads. But it's always around the same, it's how do we get to the same goal? Because we all know where the direction is. So I mentioned a book that I wrote called Results Rule, and the idea is what are the 6 choices, the subtitle of that book is Build a Culture That Blows the Competition Away. I happen to believe that culture wins all the time. And one of the choices that great cultures make is they value candor and honesty. They tell each other the truth. Now, you don't have to be brutal about it, but you have to be truthful about it. So let me see if this helps. This is the definition of teams that I typically use. I'll throw that out there as a saying, does this make sense? Diverse people united by shared purpose and values. So let's start with that. Diverse people, yes, right? Shared purpose and values. Now, that means, in this case, shared, we know where the city is going, we believe in the same things, we have a direction, which, by the way, we're going to come out of that tomorrow, hopefully with, right? That's the plan. By multiplying talents, not by subtracting. Now, you mentioned, Ricky, Texas Rangers, clear goal. Win ball games. Is win as many as you can to get to the playoffs so that you get to the playoffs and you can win the World Series. Now, if you look at that literally, if you don't get to the series every year, congratulations, you're the best loser. On the other hand, are you going to you're going to win the pennant every year? No, you want to put yourself in a position to be in that because sometimes things go the wrong way, and it's those things. But everybody there, they typically don't put, the only reason the right fielder shows up on the pitcher's mound in relief is because there's no one else to do it. And that's the person throwing 52-mile-an-hour balls up there. But outfielders know their role. You don't put certain people in certain places. There's a reason that your left tackle on a football team is the left tackle and not the right guard, much less the wide receiver. So it's understanding, the roles, and think about it. That, Counsel, what I'm about to say, I don't want to offend you, but understand, follow me on here. Paulette mentioned, when you think about this, we think about the city as one, you're really about 15 different businesses. And counsel, you're all experts and accomplished in an area. But when you look at all 15 businesses, kind of you're amateurs managing a group of professionals. Now, except for one thing. You're the expert in what the voice of the citizen is. That's the most important one, right? The expert in the voice of the citizen, and the oversight and the guidance and the direction. That's the most important part of the job. But, does anyone here know where we should pay $1 million versus $1.5 million on a fire truck? You do. But council, do any of us, right? Probably not. Now, the other thing that I've seen, this comes into where you're heading with budget, I've seen councils over and over again, they will, it'll take 5 minutes to approve $1 million, what's a fire truck now, $1.2 million? Yeah, but you could easily spend $1.2 million, right? You could go up to $1.5 million, $2 million, whatever. We'll do that in 5 minutes. On the other hand, we get wrapped around the axle for 45 minutes on why are we spending $325 for lawnmowers because I saw them on sale at Home Depot last week at $250. Now, by the way, that frustrates staff. I'll just tell you that. It frustrates staff. They're like, come on. Because in essence, we're arguing sofa change. On the other hand, it's very important because council members, we understand what that costs, right? And we all want to contribute. So I don't look at that as a bad thing. I just think we got to remind ourselves the perspective, Yeah, it's a good thing to continue to remind ourselves that. But if we believe that we're all working toward the same purpose, so can your spouse say things to you that other people can't say? And get away with it. Why is that, Russ? Why can they get away with it?
Yeah, Russ.
You're afraid of it.
Yeah.
All right, that works. Yeah, but right, the relationship, right, is there. How long have you been married? 40 years? You got a 40-year history of having your back. In public. Now, in private, she might, yeah. But in public, she has 40-year history of, you all don't have that 40-year history. You barely have, you don't even have 40 weeks of history yet. It takes some time. So let's add the staff to that mix too. Paulette, I'm going to put you on the spot. And I'll pause a second to let you get prepared for that. Has staff been worried about change?
Absolutely.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Depends.
Comment? I kind of equate it with, the scales, balance. Where's our balance going to be now? Our balance is going to shift. What I've been doing here, is it still the thing that they want me to do, or do I need to tip it the other way? And that's always kind of scary because no one likes to be off balance. We all like to be even.
So yes, first of all, I think no one is really good at change. You should know that the first book I had them read was Who Moved My Cheese? An oldie but a goodie, very short, and it was really it was really insightful. But it's not just, we've gone through a lot of change in this organization, not just the election, and so that's part of it, and a lot of unexpected change, and so yes, there's some fear of change, which is natural. But like I said, we have now in this organization a lot of honest conversations, including expressing to each other what our fears are and talking through what is the reality of that actually coming to pass. And if it does come to pass, okay, what do we do? So, I mean, we're trying to manage that fear of change as best as we can, and we're also trying to embrace it. So I don't know if y'all have read Who Moved My Cheese, but I'm pretty much scurry. Like, I don't have any problem with change. I think that's I see it coming, and I know we have to adapt. People are on various levels of the scale of the characters in our organization. But because we do what we do for a living, most of us know that we're going to have to embrace change. Those of us that have been here for a long time, and to your point earlier, Randy, this city, this community, this organization, we just haven't had a whole lot of change in a long time. We've not had, this was a different election for us. It's true, these types of elections are the norm in other communities everywhere. But so we're dealing with a lot of that. So people that have been here longer may have more trouble adjusting. People that haven't worked out for a different organization, it may take a little bit to adjust. But I like what you said earlier of also, in our relationship. So my husband and I have been married for 26 years, and we dated for 10 years before that. We have this long history.
What took him so long?
I don't know. It was me. It wasn't him.
Okay, that makes more sense. But I was
to be honest. And a lot of people in this organization, we have a long history with the current council members and the people that were on the council before, and with each other. So y'all know I worked here before, and then I came back. I have a long history with all of these folks. So having said that, it's going to take some time. That doesn't mean that we are not open to the change, that we are not embracing it, that we also are all professionals. We know who we work for. So regardless of past relationships, past friendships, and friendships that will continue in the future, we know what our jobs are. We know who we work for, and and part of that's adjusting to change. But a little grace, because we've been through a lot of unexpected change as well, which is causing more upheaval internally, not just what's brought on by the election. So
I mean, think back. Who Moved My Cheese was written how many years ago?
Gosh, it was
30 years ago?
Yeah, 30 years ago.
In the 90s, right?
Yeah.
John Cotter wrote in the 1980s, late 80s, in the Harvard Business Review, that 70% of all change efforts fail to achieve their fully desired result. That was 1980s. Now think of all the change and all the books, all the speeches, all the articles, all the web things, and of everything that we've heard about change. Cheese has been moved, iceberg has melted, all those things have happened. Don't you think we'd be better at it by now? But we're not. Current statistics is that still about 70%, 50 to 80, but 70% is about the norm of change efforts, fail to achieve their desired results. It's actually lower than that if you look at mergers and acquisitions, which I spend some time in that space, and it's actually lower than that failed to do that. And part of it is we're asking people to move differently. Now think about, any of you golfers in the room? Any golfers? All right. So you go to a golf lesson, and the pro says, I want you to change your swing. Instead of coming over, I want you to concentrate on coming down and in. Now, pretty normal thing. And eventually, how long does it take to get comfortable with that swing? You said, I don't know, I'm still going over the ball, right? So we tend to think that how long does it take to develop a new habit? Well, we've been told 21 to 30 days. That's wrong. Actual research out of the UK says in some cases it's up to a year or longer. So it really comes back to this. How much change, and is it desirable? For example, I read some years ago that eating dark chocolate was good for my heart. It didn't take me, Susie, it didn't take me 21 days to develop that habit. It was pretty easy after that, right? So certain things are easier, and the more change we're asking people to make, the longer it will take. If my golf swing is not fully broken, it doesn't take me as long to learn that new one. So we're asking people to learn and do things differently as part of it. Habits take a long time. Now, if we change the thinking and we change the direction and that changes into performance, that's what changes habits. By the way, change doesn't fail mostly because of bad change management. Change management, the way it's practiced in the world, you dealt with that. Ricky, you dealt with that. I mean, we have charters and things, and we know how to do that stuff. Change fails mostly because of faulty leadership.
That's what I was going to say. That's what good and great will tell you. If the leadership was appropriately preparing everyone, then change would not be an issue. But and I mean mayor and council again, then there wouldn't have been the same issue. Because good great tells you that everyone leaves the building. If you have all the people, process, and technology in place like you should, then everything runs just fine and nobody worries about anything.
Yeah, by the way, the interesting thing, because we talk about people who've been here younger versus older, the new folks, the younger people coming into the workplace have a word for the amount of change that we're experiencing today. You know what it is? Normal. For them, it's just the way we've always done things, because that's the only experience they know. So, there's somewhere, everybody's between like, this is normal, let's move on, to, hey, you kids, get off my lawn, and somewhere in between. And so the challenge is bringing people with them, which leads to the role of council and staff.
Well, too, I think a lot of, especially with the changes that just took place, a lot of it's just perception. And usually we find out perceptions just based on rumors, conversations, assumptions, different things like that. But most of what we fear, if we think about everything goes on, and my wife's a good example of this. She worries about every X. I don't now, and she'll worry about stuff that never is going to happen. And I try to get that over to her, and she goes, "But what if?" So a lot of times we live on what-if lifestyles, which I probably should live more over there, but I don't. And I think a lot of times our perception takes control of us more than reality does. So.
Absolutely. By the way, I would offer as a good way, when I got married, my wife said to me, Randy, I'll never ask you to change. And I thought, well, cool. And then she went on to say, but I do expect that you'll continually adapt. And for a few of you, that might be the takeaway to go home tonight with, right? Honey, you don't have to change, you do have to adapt. And she's right? It's continuing to be aware. So this is a good time to talk about council staff. It's a segue in. Here's the general principle. Council sets direction and policies. Leadership, which is council and senior staff, steers the boat. Staff rows the boat. So let's break that down. Council, policy, direction. Now, there's certain oversight things that you have to do that's required by law. We understand that. But as far as where the city is going, you set the direction, you set the policy, you set the priorities. And combined with that and the staff, and by the way, you primarily steer, one of your biggest tools for steering is the budget. Because that's where you set with the priority and say, this is where we're steering, and you've done that through the resources that you create. But you also do it through things that you vote on, things that you bring up, but that steers. Now, typically you would say council, you steer, but there's also a component of realizing, Paulette, how long have you been in city management?
Now you're putting me on the spot again. 27 years?
27 years. Okay, and that was before we had child labor laws. She started when she was 12 in an internship program. But see, I mean, you have this vast knowledge of amount of experience there that go, if you steer that way, you can steer that way. There might be a rock that you should be aware of, and you should be aware of that rock. Now, that doesn't mean you want to steer there. So one of my clients is a city in Utah that is now being sued. And they're being sued over a policy decision that the staff said to them, if you steer in this direction, really in a policy decision, it was an approval of a permit decision, that if you steer in this direction, we're likely going to get sued. And it became an issue of core values for the city that was important for them. And they said, we understand, we're making the decision. By the way, sure enough, they're being sued. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Yeah, but the process worked. The process worked because the staff did exactly what their job is, and that's to say, if you steer in this direction, you know, what's the old map of when the world was, there's monsters that live over there, right? That's their job, right? Is to say, if you go over there, there's monsters that live over there. And council, you can say, through direction and policy, I understand, we're going there anyway. Now, what would be irresponsible would be for the staff to go, whatever you all want, and council end up being surprised that you got sued. Does that make sense? Democracy is messy. And that's the best thing about it. Now, the staff, and this is really when you get especially kind of department heads, but even the level below department heads, their job is to drive the boat. And so, Blake, your comment about, we're not saying staff, you know, you're bad at your job. We're saying we want to steer in a different direction. Is everybody okay with that? Now, the question is going to become, and we'll hit this later on, if what happens Council, there will be times when you want to row and drive. There will be times that you want to drive. Paulette will tell you there's always times when council wants to drive. Always. You've got to be okay with the staff saying, you're driving now. You got to be okay with that. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be times when you still don't say, I understand, but I'm going to drive. Chances are we all do things in our lives and our business that I can't tell you the number of things that I do in my business that I do because I choose to, not because it's the right thing to do. That's okay. I only have to answer to me and my wife and, as the owners, and that's it. So, Matt, you go out and buy $10,000 in new equipment, you get to make that choice, right? You got the consequence of it, right? And so that's the way it works, right? Blake, you invest in a building that wrong part of town, or whatever. Okay, we've all done that probably at some level of that, which explains why I left an auction, charity auction some years ago, owning an Arabian horse. It's a different conversation. So we all do that stuff. Let me stop. You okay? You guys okay with the staff coming back? Now, Paulette, you're going to have to be, I understand, but we're going to row this time.
I'll jump in. I wouldn't only be okay with it, I would expect it, first off. Like, I would say a staff or leadership specifically is not doing their job if they're not pushing back on us on things that they think is best for the city. That doesn't mean I'm going to do whatever they are, I'm going to agree and vote whatever they want every time, because we may just have a conflict. We may have a disagreement on priority or whatnot. Especially if they say something like, well, you might get sued. Well, I understand their job is risk management for the city, right? Now, that doesn't mean that, well, I'm just going to give up on what I'm going to do because I might get sued on something. If I think this is a priority, this is something the citizens want to push forward, and I believe that this would hold up in court, these types of things. These conflicts can come up. And I want that kind of contention with staff. I want them to present their best case so I have the most information to make my analysis on, right? I may not have all the information until she presents it or whoever presents it. I think where we've broken down, at least I've had breakdowns with staff, is the trust was broken. I've read from high-ups in city management the things they say about me, and I'm like, well, I know I can't trust you now. I know how rules have been broken. I know how it's just stuff that should never have happened because we started getting in the wrong lanes. And I've mentioned this to Paulette before. Like, if it comes to politics, you stay in your lane and I'll stay in mine. The staff should not be playing politics. It just shouldn't. You execute on the policies set forth, exactly what it says up there, direction and policies, to the best of your ability. And give me all the information that you need to give me to make the best decisions for the city, but that doesn't mean I'm going to agree with you. And then once that agreement is made by the whole council, however we do that, right, then everybody goes forward. But the trust part is what's vital. Like, I can't have a top-level official in city management telling employees, this guy doesn't have your back. That's unacceptable, and it creates this corrosiveness to the culture of what we're doing. So, yes, absolutely. Policy and direction, strategic level, leadership, telling us when we're wrong or what the risk is, and pushing back with everything they've got, right? And then once we make a decision, let them go with it.
So you brought up a great word, trust. Some years ago, I partnered with another company to do a study on what causes mistrust, in this case, in workplaces. We surveyed about 1,100 people, which is enough to be statistically valid. We used a piece of technology that allows us to do thematic analysis of open-ended text, which is kind of a cool piece of technology. It's pretty common now. Back then it was unusual. And we analyzed all the results, and here's what we found, that when people say they trust someone or don't trust someone, it falls into a number of different categories. One is character. I think you're dishonest and unethical. Okay, that's easy. Other one, though, is competence. You're ethical, you're just an idiot. You don't know what you're doing. Now, here's the example of that. Years ago, I had the honor of being the chairman of the board for the American Heart Association for the state of Texas. During my year as chair, I traveled all over the state. I was involved in that at the state and some national level for 20 plus years. Governor Perry appointed me to the first group on cardiovascular disease and stroke for the state of Texas. And I got to set some of those policies. At one point, I knew a bunch about heart disease and stroke. That said, would anyone trust me to do the open heart surgery on someone you love? Yeah, maybe your ex-wife or spouse or whatever, that's okay, but not someone you love. So it's not about character or intent, it's about competence. I don't know what I'm doing. Third, though, is consistency. There are people out there who are good, but they're not good consistently. I can't trust that it's going to happen time and time. This comes up especially in execution. Fourth one is communication. It's not enough information, it's not the right information, it's not handling it coming at the right time. I think you're spinning me, I think you're whatever that might be. The last one came up was courage, and this was an interesting one because courage showed up as leaders who are willing to do the right thing when it's not convenient. It's that courage to take the step. Yeah, your character's in the right, but you don't have the courage to step out. So, all these make sense?
They do.
Now, here, if you had to say, if you point to an issue here, based on everything that you know right now, where do you think if you had to look at this is the number one root cause of mistrust, where would you think it would be?
Which side?
Either. Both.
Mainly communication. And mostly right now because people are talking over here. That was it.
Yeah.
I think it starts with the courage issue, I'll be honest. Some people don't communicate because they don't have a backbone. Or they fear what's next, the consequence of doing that. I don't suffer that, so I don't understand it. But I see people go, they'll have the right thing saying, they'll come tell you, but they don't want to say it out loud because of the courage, lack of courage.
Interestingly enough, in our study, communication showed up as number one. I don't disagree with you at all, Jack, that courage, it ultimately is a matter of courage to live your character and to communicate.
I think communication is the outward one that say, oh yeah, that's number one.
Right.
It's the reason you don't communicate is the next one.
Yeah, you could say I don't communicate because of lack of courage. There are also people who would say I don't communicate because it's a character issue, or how I communicate is a character issue. So communication becomes the outward example. But if we trust characters, we're all in it for the right reasons. We're all trying to do the right thing. Paulette used a great word. Well, we'd ask for some grace because we're moving and it's taken a while. Now, you all know things are moving. Is it safe to say that you're okay with things taking a while? Now, yeah.
I am, but people that send emails aren't.
Right.
The heaven, as soon as the election happened, the heavens were supposed to open up and everybody was supposed to, not repaint the electrical boxes or, let people come into the, library, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of things that everyone was the top thing on theirs. And it's like, we expected, to be able to see, Jesus Christ and God both looking down at us and talking to us as they did Stephen when he was being stoned. So, it's not,
Right.
there's
So,
not grace.
yeah, the answer, a while, most people go, yeah, a while. Now, at some point, though, a while turns into, this is forever. And that's the hard part of knowing, sort of creating that. And that's, again, part of that communication and honesty and candor is we need to move quicker. We need to be there. We need to make that move. And you're exactly right, Mayor. My wife just volunteered to be landscape committee chair in our HOA. Technically, she didn't volunteer. It was one of those where they were all kind of there. You've seen this thing where, who wants to volunteer? And everybody else steps back and forgot to tell her. She came home from the meeting and said, well, that didn't go as planned. And at one point, the word got out and the emails started coming. And at one point, I heard her say to somebody on the phone, I've been in this job for 4 days. And you can't trim trees in July. But to your point, their issue was trees, and you got your, right? So new council members, by the way, just go ahead, new council members, I'll go ahead and tell you, there's a group of folks that you're like new meat. It's like anyone who's had a problem anytime ever. Now, the hard part is understanding, is that legit, or is this someone who's clearly not somewhere up in here, right? And that's, and you figure that out, right? We're all bright people, but just, you know that. But if you trust this, any missteps here you can talk about. If you don't have this, any missteps become more challenging to overcome. These are matters of execution. And it's a moving target. I told a couple of you coming in, CEO of one of my clients, several $100 million business today, called me up on the way over this morning, and this morning he will have already had the conversation now. They're letting their COO of 6 months go. And it comes down to consistency. He's not showing the rigor to create consistent execution. And it's a good person. So, scale of 1 to 10, trust in general, 1 to 10. 10 is great, absolute trust. 1 is, we're sort of like the Democrats and the Republicans in the House. In each other, trust of each other. And where would you rate yourselves today? Just in general.
So to further clarify what Kellen just said, within the council?
Yeah, within the
or
council. Let's
to-
start within the council.
Okay.
Trust in each other as the council, right? No, trust in each other as a council. How well do you trust each other?
I think at this point, I'm closer like in the 8 to 10 range. I think I have a pretty high trust in everyone on the council, even people that I've had disagreements in the past, because I think we've aired out a lot of that, and we've kind of had a reset moment. And so, I feel very 8, 9, 10, hopefully moving in a positive direction. And I would say that's similar with staff as well. I feel just because of the amount of change that we've had, we're at a reset where I'm in a much better position personally.
Good.
I pretty much start at 10, and you have to whittle away at that. I don't really go to build trust direction, I usually start on the trust, and then you can only lose it from me.
It's interesting, by the way, when it comes to trust, with behavior styles, we've done this with other groups and we've seen this consistently. There are two types of people when it comes to trust. There are people who trust you until you prove them wrong, and there are people who don't trust you until you earn it. So, we know what the mayor is. How many of you say, I trust you until you prove me wrong? Yeah, kind of, okay. How many of you say, I don't really trust you until you earn it? Okay, a couple of you. That's my wife, by the way. Don't trust you until you earn it. I tend to be a little more the other way. I've learned sometimes you've got to do that. But see, it's important to know, right? Because, again, it sort of sets the expectation. So how about the rest of you? How would you put the trust level with counsel with each other at this point?
I think it's complicated for me because I'm kind of a trust but verify kind of person. Like, I generally trust people. A lot of people in here I've known for a while. Some I've known a little bit better than others. But it's that kind of, I generally trust you, but if something sounds fishy, I'm going to go research that. Like, I don't blindly trust everyone, because I feel like sometimes, because everybody's been burned by trusting the wrong person before, and so you get into that, I'll trust you, but I don't want that to come back and bite me if I shouldn't have trusted you, sort of situation.
Good. How about you, Russ? Where do you fall?
I'm going to go 8 to 10. I think everyone on the council right now and staff, as far as that goes, I have not seen anything to say don't trust. So, I'm going to go with probably 8 to 10. I don't, I'm sort of like this. I've been burned enough times over the years that I'm, there is that little bit of, okay, am I being directed exactly the way it's supposed to be, or I'm, is this just a comfort answer to me for some?
Right.
So I have to deal with it. That's me. That's not them. That's me.
Susie, how about you?
So on trust, I've always been told that I'm too trusting, but I don't know how to be any other way. That is, and it's until you've done something, someone has done something to make me think, whoa, what did I just step into? So I do trust everyone here because we're here to do a job. And I trust that we're going to do the job that we're going to do. Yes, we're going to take a different path, but the road less traveled. We still have the same goal, and that's for our citizens to have what they need. When the path is too smooth, we get complacent. Sometimes the beauty is in taking taking the business route rather than the highway route. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And it's bumpier. And you don't know what you're going to experience along the way, and it could be something terrible. It could be something super great. And I came up with that because of some stuff from years ago. But I just had a colleague just tell me this week what happened. Same thing with him. Came up, we're on roadblock in congestion that was blocked because of the hurricane. Had to take a different route and ended up finding some things that were very sentimental to his family. So I think, taking the different route is a good thing, but we're still trying to achieve the same goal. So today I would say with Russ and Blake. Yeah, Blake.
Matt. Matt.
Blake with the 8 to 10.
Yeah, that Blake.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
And so I don't come on that lightly because I am by nature a very trusting person until something has happened to break that trust.
Good.
And I will give the benefit of the doubt because there's.
Ricky, where are you right now?
I'm at the 7 to 8 percentile. And it's because for almost half here, we lived on the mean streets of North Richland Hills. So you kind of went through the trenches a little bit, and other people with just personal relationships too, building up the past few years. You're seeing the trust build up there. And also, I'm the other way. I don't trust you automatically till you earn it, and that's just from maybe from raising. It's one of those like you don't talk about your paycheck with other people type thing, because I have a healthy balance of corporate and government on my resume. And I learned a long time ago. You're talking to who you think is your best friend. Well, now the other person over there, that's their best friend too. So that's how everything spreads, type thing. And a lot of people don't understand that until they get burned, type attitude. So I think overall it's a 7-8 because it's working with or being with someone for so long compared to other people I'm building relationships with the past few years too. That's building up. So 7-8 until something goes wrong.
He spent too much time in Austin.
I understand. Kelvin, how about you?
Well, I would go more I'm pretty much, I don't say optimistic, but I was going to say 10 probably also. And I do think it's more of the, get the benefit of the doubt up front. And like Matt said, it's kind of like Reagan said, trust but verify. So I assume that everybody that's here, they went through the rigors of elections and everything like that. They want to be here. They want to serve. They want to do the best thing they can for the city. So I'm going to assume they're here to make improvements.
Good. Go ahead.
Sorry, I want to fill my answer out a little bit more. So two things. First off, I want to point out, Susie and I, we had a great conversation at the polling location, I think. It started out really rough. I mean, we were kind of like heated. And then we just stuck in it. We stuck with it for a little bit, and we threshed it out. We were like trying to communicate, what are we talking about here, and just trying to define the terms maybe a little bit, and then getting more into like the intent of the conversation and both of our intents and what we were doing. And it turned into a really great conversation. It ended with a beautiful picture of the two of us smiling. And I just think that's a good representation of how this should work, where we're approaching this with two different perspectives. We're going to battle over it because what we think is right. We're finding what each other, we're trying to understand each other's positions, and maybe in a way that I can defend her position the best way possible that she would agree with, right? Understanding that. And then able to find some compromise position in the middle where we know, hey, you know what, we both want what's best. So it was a really good interaction that we had. And then secondly, my number, my 8 to 10, is based on like the intent. Okay, so when I talk about I trust this person, that their intent is true, what they're telling me, or I believe what they're trying to tell me. That doesn't mean I necessarily agree with it or that the information is accurate, right? So I know with Paulette or with staff, like I question people constantly, and especially our old lawyer, and that's not. It's not necessarily, it can be sometimes, but if I'm questioning you, why are we doing it this way? No, I disagree, that's not accurate, I want to see the instructions, right? It's not that I disagree with your intent or that you're a good person, it's that I think the information may be inaccurate and I'm going to dig down deep into it. I picked this up in the Navy. I had a captain who would just drill me every single time I talked to him, and it was frustrating as anything. And he would always dig down into the details, and he would find inaccuracies a lot of times. I was told the wrong information. This is the way we've always done it, but all that stuff. And so, once again, just separating the two things. There's intent about the person and their character, and do they really want what's right? I trust that here, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to question people with what they tell me. So please don't take those questions personally a lot of times.
Yeah, there is a principle out there that says, I can understand without agreeing, but I can't agree without understanding. So I think that becomes an important distinction. The thing that you said, because I said, we understand each other. Maybe we still disagree, but we understand each other.
It comes down to understanding where everyone's individual strengths are. And it goes back to that team. It's individuals on the team. You have to have all the different players to make the team work. Y'all can't, not like you said, not everybody can be the pitcher. Someone's got to be the outfield. And it's knowing where each one of our strengths lies. I mean, for the most part, you know, a happy, positive person. And yeah, I'm Parks and Rec, you know. That's what I came up through. I mean, that's what I did for, you know, in my career for a while before I dealt with people, before I did HR, you know. So I'm in tune to the people. You know, that's one of my strengths. And, you know, Blake's ability to ask the deep questions, that's pretty cool. But each one of us brings something different to the table, and we need to recognize that in each other on what we bring to the table, because that's where you can get your best dialogue and coming to the center and meeting together as the team.
Councils usually find a way, if there's competencies that are missing, councils find a way for somebody to step into that role. I think boards in general do, for school board or council, but councils especially find a way to step into that role. So, for example, one of my previous councils that I worked with, I had one guy on the council who was an attorney. And everybody sort of knew his role, dig into the contracts. And they trusted him to do that. Now, the interesting thing is he said, I don't, you know, this is what I do in my life. I don't want to come here and do that all the time anyway. But so there's, you got to find that balance, right? If, you know, Mayor was the CFO. He's used to digging into the balance sheets and the numbers. And by the way, it is frustrating. There's not a consistent balance sheet in how government works. I mean, everybody's got a different one. And so he's sort of natural to do into that. But at the same time, but it would also be a mistake to say his only contribution is the balance sheet. So it's understanding all those things about each other. Good. Paulette, just out of curiosity, where do you fall in all this? How well do you trust, what's the trust level between you and this group at this point?
I would say 8 to 9. And again, when you're talking the group as a whole, just because it's new, I'm generally a person who trusts. I trust right away, and then you got to. If you show me I can't trust you, then it's done.
You're dead to me.
But over the years, I don't start at a 10 anymore, because again, you know, years of experience, getting burned. But you know, I'm a lot more jaded now than I was in my 20s and 30s. So, but I would say it's a 8 to 9.
Good.
You know, yeah.
Yeah, I realize that I took a little time to go through that, but I wanted to, the reason it's important is your last election was very out of context for this community, historically. And it's easy to look at that and go, I walk in with people automatically as my enemy. I think to elevate back up out of that is crucial.
I was just going to say, when right after I got elected, during the campaign, I kept hearing in my trust level. I'm saying this because my trust level went from like an 8 to a 10 immediately with Alicia and Paulette on the issue, but with somebody in the city who owns a business, it went from a 10 to a 5 because I'm being told one thing and just getting worn out on it. And when I said I need to bring this to the council, and they both said, Mr. Mitchell, here's the whole story. So here I'm sitting, what I'm considering getting burned by someone, but I come back, they both had my back and took care of me and said, hey, here's the whole story, but we'll also make contact and make sure everybody's on the same page. So over here, the trust factor went up. Over here, the trust factor went down. So, you know, as far as the group here, I mean, they sold me immediately on that one instance right there. Whereas that other person sold me the opposite way on that one instance. So it goes up and down, I think. But once you've had a couple experiences with people, I think that's where that trust gets solidified. So
That's understanding their communication style as well. Sometimes you have to peel back an onion. I reserve judgment, or at least extend grace, when I'm trying to learn how people respond, because I'm not the best responder in the world. And so I know that that I have to start understanding the communication side. It's Myers-Briggs thing, right? I mean, it's coming back to that and going, I need to make sure I try to communicate at the level that that person wants to communicate with me. You know, talking to actuaries is one thing, talking to salespeople is way something different. And I prefer one over the other, but I've adapted to the other one as well. So,
Good. Let's move on. Talk about mission and purpose. Now, some organizations want to call, you have a mission statement here. Some people call it a purpose statement. It's what we're here to do. It's why we exist. All right, so we kind of break this down. We spend a lot of time talking about here's our role. We're pretty clear on that. Here's kind of where we are working together, and realizing that everybody's coming in right now. You know, we're not gonna hug. We're not gonna do a group hug. But you know, I think everybody's gonna like, okay, we're optimistic. Okay, you guys can group hug at lunch, but if you want, I don't really care. But you know, we're optimistic. We're ready to work together. Now let's talk about kind of moving down into here's what we're here to do. Here's the work of the city, and this is, again, my expectation is not that you're going to automatically adopt what is previous. So if you want to change it, you can. But at the same time, if you go, no, we're pretty good with the mission. I mean, one of the things that I heard from, and the survey results point out, is that most of the dissatisfaction was not about what the goals, where we are, it's about what priorities were and how we were operating and moving toward them. Okay, so this can change, but this is your mission as it sits right now.
can I interject something?
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to derail the conversation at all. The food is here.
Then
for
let's take a
lunch.
break.
Can we come back at noon?
Let's come
And
back, well, why don't you take, because it'll take a while to go through, it's 20 of right now. Let me give you about 30 minutes till 10 after.
10 after? Okay.
Yeah, to take a break, answer your emails, do whatever you need to do, and then come back, grab your food, we'll work and eat.
Perfect.
See
Thank
you
you.
then.
Wait, I have to say something before Alicia says, you should have said something.
We're adjourning for lunch.
No, it's about you. I'll research the city council goals and planning work session at 11:41, and the city council will reconvene following lunch. Thank you.